Nestled deep in the vast, untamed countryside, far from the bustling towns, lived a solitary rancher. His life was a rhythm of hard work, sunrise to sunset tending cattle, repairing fences, and keeping to himself. For years, he had embraced this quiet existence, isolated from the world, with only the hum of nature and the company of his animals. His ranch, a modest haven of weathered wood and open fields, had always been enough for him. Yet, in the quiet corners of his heart, a deep loneliness stirred. One crisp morning, as he made his way to the barn, he spotted something unexpected: a horse, barely standing, its coat matted with dirt and its ribs visible beneath the pale skin. The creature appeared half dead, its eyes dull with exhaustion, as if life had been slowly drained from it. The rancher's eyes softened, though his face remained unreadable. It was a rare thing, indeed, to find such a fragile creature in the vast wilderness. The horse's survival was uncertain, its future teetered on the edge of despair. Yet something stirred inside the rancher. It wasn't the promise of a quick reward or the desire to prove himself. No, it was something deeper. An echo of compassion, long buried beneath years of self-sufficiency, whispered to him. Without hesitation, he approached the horse, a silent promise forming in his heart. He would try to save it. As he knelt beside the animal, offering it water, a quiet understanding passed between them. In that moment, the rancher wasn't just saving a horse, he was beginning to heal something within himself. For days, the rancher fought against the unforgiving elements, trying to breathe life back into the frail creature. The horse, though alive, was barely more than a skeleton wrapped in skin. Its breathing was shallow, and each step it took seemed to drain it of what little energy remained. But the rancher didn't give up. He could have easily called it quits, written the animal off as a lost cause, but something inside him refused to accept defeat. Each morning, he would rise before dawn, his boots heavy with the weight of responsibility. The horse was kept in a small corral near the barn, where the rancher had made a makeshift shelter to protect it from the biting wind. The rancher would approach the horse cautiously, speaking softly as he offered water and small bits of food. The creature's eyes, once clouded with pain, began to show flickers of recognition as it accepted his help. Yet it was clear that the road to recovery was long and uncertain. Every day felt like a battle. The rancher, though skilled in the ways of cattle and ranch life, found himself struggling with the intricacies of horse care. He had never dealt with such a fragile animal before. His cattle, stubborn as they were, had always been far more resilient. He scoured old veterinary books for guidance, learning to mix herbs and concoctions to ease the horse's ailments. He massaged its stiff muscles and kept its wounds clean, even though the horse flinched with every touch. Still, the rancher was determined, even when the progress seemed almost imperceptible. The bond between them grew quietly, almost imperceptibly. He named the horse Rusty, a simple name that felt fitting. Its coat was a dull, faded chestnut, but it had a strength in its eyes, a flicker of spirit that reminded him of something long lost. It became the rancher's routine to sit with Rusty during the evenings, his presence a comfort in the otherwise empty world. He had always been a man of few words, but with the horse, he found himself speaking softly, telling it about his past, about his wife, whom he had lost years ago, and the quiet life he had made for himself. Days blurred into weeks, and Rusty's condition slowly improved. The horse began to stand on its own, its legs no longer trembling from weakness. Its coat, though still patchy, began to regain its luster. The rancher could see the spark returning in its eyes. Yet the work was far from over. Every morning, he would fight the temptation to check if Rusty had gotten better overnight. Each moment was a test of patience, but the rancher kept going. Every ounce of effort he poured into Rusty felt like a reflection of something he had buried deep inside, a longing for connection, for purpose, for a life that wasn't just about surviving but living. And as Rusty's condition improved, so did the rancher's heart. The isolation he had embraced for so long began to feel less absolute. The walls that he had carefully constructed over the years started to crack, letting in the faintest glimmer of hope. He wasn't just saving a horse, he was saving himself. It was just another quiet morning on the ranch. The sky, painted with the soft hues of dawn, was still dim when the rancher stepped outside. Rusty, the horse, was grazing peacefully in the corral, his legs strong beneath him and his coat gleaming in the early light. The rancher smiled softly, a rare expression that seemed to stretch across his usually stoic face. For the first time in weeks, there was a sense of peace on the ranch, a feeling that he hadn't had in years. He was about to start his morning chores when he noticed something unusual. In the distance, faint plumes of smoke rose lazily into the sky. The rancher squinted, narrowing his eyes. It wasn't uncommon to see smoke from nearby campfires, especially from the local farming families or the occasional travelers passing through the area. But this was different. The smoke was too thick and far too close. He shrugged it off, thinking it was nothing to worry about, but as the day progressed, the smoke only grew more intense. By noon, the rancher could see the distinct shapes of people moving across the horizon, far beyond the hills at the edge of his property. His gut tightened with an unease he couldn't quite explain. Then, as the sun began to set, he heard the sound distant at first, like the steady thud of hooves against earth. His heart quickened. Whoever was coming was moving fast, and there were many of them. His instincts kicked in, and he walked slowly to the edge of the ranch, peering through the trees at the approaching figures. What he saw stopped him cold. A group of riders, more than he had ever seen at once, were charging toward his land, at least 100, maybe more. Their faces were fierce, their bodies adorned with intricate patterns of war paint. Their horses, sturdy and proud, galloped with a strength that seemed to echo the very earth beneath them. The rancher's heart raced, and his breath hitched in his throat. The riders did not slow. They didn't stop to ask for directions or approach with any semblance of politeness. They were coming straight for the ranch. The rancher's mind spun in confusion and fear. Who were these people? What did they want? His first instinct was to retreat, to lock himself inside the house, but something deep inside told him that running wouldn't solve this. The riders approached with a swift, unyielding force. He could see the sharp gleam of spears and arrows, the calculated way they moved together as one unit. Despite their fearsome appearance, there was a certain calm about them, as though they were not here to pillage but to fulfill a purpose. When they reached the outskirts of the ranch, they stopped. One rider, larger than the rest and wearing a distinct headdress, dismounted his horse and approached. His eyes met the rancher's dark and intense, filled with an unspoken command. The rancher's heart pounded as he took a hesitant step forward, unsure of what to expect. The leader spoke, his voice deep and steady, though it carried an undeniable authority. "We seek the horse you've saved," he said, his words clear despite the heavy accent. "It belongs to us." The rancher's throat tightened. He couldn't believe his ears. The horse. Rusty. But he had saved it. It was his now. Or so he thought. The air between them was thick with tension. The rancher stood frozen, his mind racing. What did they mean? And why now, after everything? As the leader's eyes bore into him, the rancher realized that his life was about to change forever. The rancher stood frozen in place, his mind struggling to catch up with the reality of the situation. The leader of the riders, tall, imposing, and with a presence that commanded immediate respect, was staring at him intently, as if waiting for the rancher to respond. The others remained on their horses, their eyes on him, their faces unreadable. The tension in the air was thick, palpable, as though every breath taken could be the one that shattered the fragile peace between them. For a moment, the rancher simply blinked, trying to make sense of the words that had just been spoken. "The horse you've saved." He turned his gaze to Rusty, who stood in the corral just behind him, its coat gleaming in the late afternoon sunlight. The horse had become more than just an animal to him. It was a companion, a symbol of the healing he had undergone himself. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. This horse, this creature he had nursed back to life, wasn't just an abandoned animal, it was part of something much larger. "I don't understand," the rancher finally managed, his voice rough with confusion. "What do you mean, belongs to you?" "I saved this horse. It was dying, and now it's healthy. It's mine." The tribal leader's eyes softened, but his expression remained steady. "You have done a great service, and for that we thank you," he said, his voice carrying a deep, resonant tone. "But the horse you have saved is sacred to our people. It is no ordinary animal. It is a symbol of our tribe, a link to the spirits of our ancestors. It is not meant for one person alone to claim." The rancher frowned. He didn't know much about Native American traditions. His life had been one of solitude and self-sufficiency, but something in the leader's voice rang with truth. There was no mistaking the reverence in his words. "This horse," the leader continued, "was part of a ritual, a spiritual bond we share with the land and the creatures that roam it. It is said that the horse carries the spirits of our ancestors, that it guides us through the struggles of life. Without it, our tribe's balance is disrupted. The horse's disappearance is why our people have been unsettled for so long. The rancher's chest tightened as the weight of the revelation settled in. He had known that the horse was special, but he had never imagined its importance went beyond the physical. This wasn't just about saving a life, it was about something far deeper, something intertwined with the very essence of the tribe's culture and spiritual practices. The leader gestured toward the other riders, who were now dismounting and gathering near the rancher. Their faces were solemn, their expressions unreadable, but there was no aggression in their posture, only a quiet, dignified certainty. The rancher noticed the intricate tattoos on their faces, symbols that spoke of a long history, of battles fought and bonds forged with the land. "We had heard rumors," the leader continued, "of a horse being found in the wilderness, one that had been lost for many moons. Our elders spoke of a prophecy that a stranger would save the horse, and in doing so, the balance would be restored to our people. We did not know who this stranger would be, only that they would recognize the horse's true nature." The rancher was stunned. A prophecy. It sounded like something out of a story, not the reality he had known. He glanced at Rusty, who stood quietly in the corral, its eyes watching the gathering with an almost knowing look. How could this ordinary animal, which he had simply taken in out of compassion, be the key to something so profound? "You must understand," the leader said, his voice taking on a gentler tone, "this is not about ownership. It is about the land, the spirit of the earth, and the balance of all things. The horse must return to us, so that we can restore that balance." The rancher stood silently, his mind racing. He thought of the hours spent nursing Rusty back to health, of the bond they had formed during those long, quiet days. He had never thought of the horse as anything more than a creature in need of care. But now, with the tribe's words hanging heavy in the air, he saw things in a new light. The horse wasn't just an animal. It was part of a living, breathing world that he had never truly understood. Rusty nickered softly from the corral, as if sensing the shift in the atmosphere. The rancher's heart tightened. He couldn't simply give the horse away, not after everything he had done. He had put so much into this animal, invested so much of himself into its recovery. And yet, as he looked at the tribe, at the solemn faces of the warriors who had come to reclaim it, he realized that his attachment wasn't just about ownership. It was about understanding. The leader stepped closer, placing a hand on the rancher's shoulder. "We ask only that you return the horse to us, not as a gift, but as a means of restoring what was lost. It is a part of something much greater than either of us." The rancher's throat tightened, but he nodded slowly, the weight of his decision settling over him. He had come to understand, in the most unexpected way, that sometimes giving something up wasn't about loss, it was about honoring something far larger than oneself. Rusty, the horse he had saved, was not his to keep. It belonged to the spirits of the land, and to the people who had lived with it long before he had ever come to this place. The rancher's heart pounded in his chest as he stood facing the tribe, his mind swirling with the weight of what had just been revealed. Rusty, the horse he had saved, was not simply a creature in need of care. It was a sacred being, a living connection to the spirits of the land and the tribe's ancestors. The revelation struck him with an intensity he hadn't expected. For a moment, he wondered if he had truly understood the depth of his own actions. Was he just a man who happened to save a horse, or had he played a part in something far larger than himself? He looked at the horse now, standing calm in the corral, as if it understood the gravity of the moment. The bond they had formed over the weeks wasn't something he could easily cast aside. Rusty had become his companion, and in many ways, a lifeline and anchor that had grounded him in a life he had long resigned himself to. He could feel the pull of attachment tightening in his chest, but he knew the decision before him wasn't about ownership. It wasn't about what he wanted. It was about respect for something ancient, something sacred. The tribal leader stood silently before him, awaiting his response, and the rancher felt the weight of those expectant eyes. He thought of his wife, of the years he had spent alone, building walls around his heart. For the first time, he understood that true strength didn't come from keeping things to oneself. True strength came from letting go, knowing when to hold on and when to release. The horse had been a part of his healing, but it belonged to something much larger, something outside of himself. Slowly, he stepped toward the corral, his hand reaching out for the gate. Rusty's eyes met his, and for a moment, time seemed to freeze. With a deep breath, the rancher opened the gate and stepped back. Rusty hesitated, then walked toward the waiting tribe. As the leader took the horse's reins, the rancher felt a strange sense of peace. The decision had been hard, harder than anything he had ever done, but it was right. He had saved the horse, and in doing so, he had given it back to the land, to the people it truly belonged to. He watched silently as the tribe moved away, the weight on his shoulders lighter than he had ever expected. As the tribe disappeared into the horizon, the rancher stood silently, the weight of the moment settling over him like a soft, inevitable rain. His hand still tingled from the brief touch of Rusty's mane as the horse passed from his care to the tribe's hands. He had given up something he had come to love, but he felt no bitterness, no regret, only a quiet, unexpected peace. The sun was setting, casting a golden light over the fields, and for the first time in a long while, the rancher didn't feel the familiar sting of isolation. In releasing Rusty, he had let go of the last of his emotional barriers, embracing the understanding that true connection wasn't about possession. It was about giving, about honoring something larger than oneself. He turned back to the ranch, the sound of his boots crunching softly in the dirt. Life would go on. The days would still pass in their unhurried rhythm, the work would remain, but something had shifted. He was no longer just a solitary figure in the vast landscape. He had been part of something greater, if only for a moment. And for the first time in years, the rancher didn't feel alone. A new chapter had begun, not just for the tribe or the horse, but for him, too.